The Lewis-Clark Valley Murders. A cluster of unsolved murders and disappearances that occurred in the Lewiston-Clarkston metropolitan area of northern Idaho between 1979 and 1982. Law enforcement investigators have identified 4 victims and possibly a 5th that are connected to a single suspect. With a total of 5 victims in such a short span of time, and in seemingly such a friendly area, what do you really know about this terrible incident? Join us, as we learn a little more about this case and its victims. Beginning in 1979, a series of murders and disappearances occurred in the normally peaceful, Lewiston-Clarkston metropolitan areas of Idaho and Washington. The crimes haunted the victims' families and communities and baffled investigators. The victims of this crime were all under the age of 35, and some were never found. The first victim was Christina White. Christina Lee White, who was 12 at the time, was last seen in Idaho, Washington, on April 28, 1979, at the Idaho County Fair. She called her mother at around 2:30 p.m. from a friend's house to report feeling ill from the heat, but because she did not own a car, her mother was unable to pick her up, and instead, she advised Christina to rest, lay down, and apply a moist towel to her neck, then, when she felt better, to return home. Her mother assumed she had gotten better and returned to the fair when she did not phone back. Between 7 and 10 p.m., Christina was last seen on the 500 block of 2nd Street, however, she was not there when her mother arrived to pick her up. When her classmates last saw her, she was reportedly on her way home. A few weeks after she vanished, her schoolwork was discovered in pieces at a field outside of Idaho. Christina was also last seen riding her white 10-speed bicycle at the time of her disappearance, which has never been located. The next victim was Kristen David. Senior student at the University of Idaho, Kristen Noel David, 22, was last seen riding a bicycle on June 26, 1981, while traveling from Moscow, Idaho, south on U.S. Highway 95 to Lewiston, Idaho. David's dismembered remains were first found on July 4, 1981, 6 miles west of Clarkston, Washington, and just west of Silket Island, in and along the Snake River. The following day, some, but not all of the bones were discovered somewhere down the river. The body parts were wrapped in pages from several local newspaper editions from April 1981, and the remains were hidden inside black plastic bags. Clothing, other personal belongings, and David's blue 10-speed bicycle were never found. Several people who were traveling on Highway 95 the day David vanished claimed to have seen a woman who matched David's description being approached by a man in a brown vehicle on the west or southbound side of the road just outside Genesee, Idaho. According to additional eyewitnesses, the same man approached or interacted with various female cyclists and pedestrians on Highway 95 the same day. The remaining 3 victims were Christina Diane Nelson, Jacqueline Ann Miller, and Stephen Pearsall. Christina Diane Nelson, 21, and her stepsister Jacqueline Ann Miller, 18, disappeared while walking from Nelson's apartment to a grocery store in downtown Lewiston, Idaho on September 12, 1982, and on the same night, Stephen Pearsall, 35, also went missing from the Lewiston Civic Theater. Lewiston asked his friends to drop him off at the theater which he worked at, so he could do some laundry washing and clarinet practice, and he has not been seen or heard from since. Uncharacteristically for Pearsall, he left his clarinet at the theater, and also left an uncashed paycheck at his apartment and his car parked at a friend's house. Pearsall was well known to both women and had a big brother-like relationship with them. They only lived a few blocks away from his apartment, and on their way to the store, they would have passed the theater and may have even gone inside. Nelson had worked as a janitor at the theater before quitting, and Pearsall took her position. Pearsall and Nelson had also both attended Lewis-Clark State College. The remains of Nelson and Miller were found on March 19, 1984, in a rural area 35 miles from Lewiston near Kendrick, Idaho. Investigators were unable to determine a cause of death for Nelson, but determined that Miller had been murdered, and Pearsall's body was never located. Investigators initially suspected Pearsall may have been involved in the Nelson Miller abduction and murders, but later stated that all three had probably been in or near the theater at the time they vanished and were likely victims of the same killer. Authorities believe it is possible Pearsall witnessed their murders and was himself killed as a result. Though no arrests have been made to this day, authorities believe these cases are linked to a single suspect. The suspect, Lance Jeffrey Voss, served in the Navy from 1965 to 1968, and during that time, he worked on ships that docked in Hong Kong, Hawaii, Washington, and California. According to police reports, in June 1972, Voss was arrested and charged with burglary, but the prosecutor gave him the option to plead down to trespassing. Voss never admitted why he was at the mortuary, but eerily, there were two teenage girls inside that night. Voss admitted to investigators that he had seen Christina before she disappeared, and during search efforts, family members of Christina told police that Voss had approached them and offered to assist. The police report said that Voss refused a polygraph test, but investigators did conduct a voice stress analysis, which reflected deceptive answers. Police reportedly discovered that Voss had regularly made deliveries for his work near the known location where Kristen David was last seen in Lewiston. During an interview with police, Voss also admitted he saw Stephen Pearsall at the theater the night he disappeared, adding that he left around 9 p.m. and went to eat pizza at a local restaurant. Despite the circumstantial evidence linking Voss to the abductions and murders, he was never arrested and the cases remain unsolved. So, what are your thoughts on this case? Had you ever heard of it before today? Does anyone live in or around this area? Leave a comment and let me know. Thank you for watching.